Hi Blaze fans and everybody else that may be watching this. Ed Kimberley with Danny Stewart. It's nearly 30 degrees outside. We're in the height of the off season and we thought it was a good time to touch base with Danny, touch base with the Blaze organisation and see where we were up to. And I know, Danny, you've been wanting to do this for a couple of weeks as well, and our schedules haven't quite matched, so it's great to finally nail each other down and see what's going on. So thank you firstly.
Yeah, no problem.
And before we touch base on what's been going on in the off season, there's a big thing happened during the regular season that it's no secret now. James Pease moved on. He was GM. He helped you out behind the bench, and he was almost Mr. Coventry Blaze. He'd been with the organisation since he had hair, and he did a lot for the club. So I just wanted you to touch on that and what happened with him moving on.
Well, I mean, obviously James made a decision in his from a professional standpoint to move on from the Blaze, and it's a bit of an adjustment period. It's still ongoing. It's not something that just is easily forgotten about or easy for us as employees to adapt to. So there's going to be things that come up over the next few months to a year that we won't really recognize until they do pop up. And but in saying that, James is, he was a great ambassador for this club, on the ice, off the ice, everything. I don't think people understand how hard that guy worked. He had a hand in every part of this organization, from the on ice to the off ice to the commercial to everything, managing people, and he'll be a huge mess for us. And it's going to be a transition period in certain areas, but in saying that, there's a lot of good things that he put in place, and the work that he did, there are some things that will tick over and that we'll pick up on, but definitely he's left us in a good position from the work that he's done.
You touched on that transitional period, and this kind of touches on something that a lot of fans have aired their voices about. They've asked questions directly. We put it out on Twitter to say, hey, we're speaking with Danny, what do you guys want to know? And one of them, it's a broad category, but what are we going to do differently? And as we're talking mainly off ice with James, you brought in Keno as a skills and development coach. You brought in Syria as well as a mindfulness coach. Tell us about those decisions, because that's going down that road of what we're doing differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Dale Keane is a guy that I've known for, it must be 8 or 9 years now, and I've seen him develop and grow as a coach. And skills development is a very specific area, and it's an area that I felt that I could use a little help on. We coaches in this league have a lot on our plates, and there's a reason why top levels have coaching staffs of 8 or 9, and what I want to do, we have a lot of practice time, and what I wanted to do is incorporate a little bit more skill work and specific stuff with that. And he's a guy he's gone to school to be a sport coach. He's gone away to camps in Sweden. He's worked with some very good people, with like Ted Sakoinen, who's a skills coach in Russia right now for a locomotive team, and he's learned a lot off him and other people as well. And he's really good at his trade. He's passionate, and I think on top of that, and what he brings, he's a very bubbly personality character. He's a guy that guys love wherever he goes, and I think he'll bring some energy to our organization, and it's just something that will help me as a coach, and at the same time, I think giving an opportunity to a young British coach to kind of apply his trade as well is something that we feel good about, and he's so excited to do it, and we're looking forward to having him.
And Syria as well, a mindfulness coach. That's something very, very different. And when the PR came out and the announcement was made, the first thing that came to my mind was, will he help with this weighting that seems to be a little bit different between the North American game and the Elite League? In the Elite League, the league is the prize that everybody wants. In North America, it's just getting through the league, getting to the playoffs, and the playoffs is the prize. Is that the kind of thing he can help with as well?
I think so. We had hit a tough stretch last year through the Christmas period and into January, and we obviously had some up and down results, and I don't, again, and I'll say it, and people will be critics all they want, but we played some good hockey last year. We just found ways to lose hockey games. By no means did I ever feel like teams were coming in here and outplaying us night in, night out, and we hit that stretch, and then we hit that weekend where, due to a suspension, I couldn't be on the bench, and we went into Manchester, and it was the worst night of our season, and a bad, heavy loss. And then we came back the following night and played Guildford at home and lost 7-4. And I had been looking at due to some of the things that had happened in the first half of the year and through the Christmas break, I'd been looking at some means outside of the club to maybe look at helping these guys from a mental point of view, and we had some individual cases where I felt guys could use some help, and also as a team. And I really felt that a lot of our downfalls last year were mental, and playing stressed in crucial moments and not staying in the moment. And I think after that weekend we kind of got Surrey on board, and he came in those last good 2 months, and we did some exercises with the guys, and I think what it did, it created a little bit of discussion. It created some awareness, and and through those exercises, I think when we found ourselves in those situations, I think guys just reflected and were able to just maybe be a little bit more calm and rely on their skills and their instincts rather than stress about things that were out of our control. And we had a lot of close games down the stretch that we ended up winning, and I think through the guys finding confidence, and our play obviously got a little bit better, but I certainly think that what he brought to the table helped us in a certain way as well. And for me, looking at this year, to have that resource from the start of the year was a no-brainer for me.
And I suppose he would take the almost sports psychology, the mental load off the captains, off the assistant captains, which brings me on to my next point, because this is something that not only the fans are wanting to know what the situation is, but also personally, and that's Jordan Petrus, the captain. He's been a big part of this organisation for the last few seasons. Where are we with him?
Yeah, Jordan has been. I have nothing, I would never have a bad word to say about Jordan. He was a phenomenal player, person in the last 3 seasons. There's no news to report right now. Both parties are still looking at options, and he's a guy that's been a great ambassador for our club, and when we do have news, we'll certainly update you as soon as we have it.
Are there any other pieces from last year's roster that are in the frame to come back for next year?
Not as right now. So I think it's safe to say that the people that we're looking to bring in will be new blood.
Okay, and that again segues nicely. Let's talk about your vision when you recruit in the off season. I know you come into the office, which I mentioned earlier, it's 28 degrees outside, not ideal. You've got no windows in there. How do you put a team together? In my mind, it's almost like a prison wanted board. You've got all your suspects ready to go, rough lines, your pieces move around. Is that kind of what it's like, or is it not as romanticised?
You certainly got to look at your targets, areas that you want to get better. You gotta reflect on the season prior and see where you can get better and where you went wrong, and then you also, it's one thing that maybe fans don't consider at times is the budgetary things. These players these days, every year they come back to a club, they want a little bit more, and we have to fall within that budget. And sometimes guys move on for those reasons. Sometimes guys are looking for fresh starts. So not everybody that's not returning is due to our decisions. Some are decisions on their own. Obviously, through the last couple of months, we've learned that a couple guys have decided to retire. So that puts a little bit of a speed bump in your recruiting plans as well. So guys that you certainly had expected to come back, decide to retire, then you're looking to fill that spot as well. So but budget reasons I think are a big thing, but certainly upgrades and looking to where we can get to. And it's not a perfect world. You go out there and you feel like you are making an upgrade, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So but certainly specifically, I think on the back end, we wanted to get a lot stronger on the back end. I think that's an area that we can definitely improve. And I think last season we were missing those kind of maybe number 1 and number 2 top D-men. And I think it reflected in not just our power play, but those situational minutes, those closing out games in the third period, and having those guys log important minutes against other teams' top lines, and killing off a late penalty or whatever the case may be. And because we did find ourselves in a lot of those close games that we managed to slip away. So for me, the biggest thing was finding those 2 top D-men, and that's that's an ongoing process. And we lost some goals. We've lost some goals. Marco Valeron's moved on. Ryan Dingle's retired. That's a lot of goals to replace. So we certainly got to find some goals and some quality up front as well.
A term that's been bandied around by a few coaches I've seen in PR is the term dry market. Now, explain that to us. And also, does that change? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, North American contracts run out June 30th, so they start July 1st. So does the market change after that, where guys know they haven't been renewed? How does that work?
It's not so much the market. A lot of guys are uncertain of what they want to do. What I will say is, there's leagues that maybe are more of a priority for some players. Every team in this league has talked about getting younger and getting hungrier. Well, the problem with that, getting younger and hungrier, is guys that are younger and guys that are hungrier, unfortunately, aren't always looking to the UK as their number one destination. And when you get to this point in the summer, the draft is over. A lot of guys that are maybe waiting on, American League deals, whether it's a one-way or a two-way deal, they kind of start realizing their fate about this time. And after July 1st, the East Coast League, which is a league that we really, heavily recruit from, and so do other teams in the league, they give out their qualifying offers. And, a lot of guys at that point know where they stand, and not just that, we're getting a little bit later in the summer, so guys are looking more to make decisions, whereas in April, May, guys are kind of holding out, or trying to hit home runs with their contract negotiations, and that puts a delay on things. But you can see around the league there's a lot of teams that have been quite quiet on their announcements, and I think guys are just being smart right now, because we as a club and as a league, I'm sure other clubs are the same, you have to stay within your means. And if you go and you break the bank in April, then you're just picking up the pieces when you get to July and August. So definitely had a lot of positive talks here in the last couple of weeks, and a lot more names coming across the desk and a lot more interest. So we'll hopefully have some news here soon.
It's interesting you talk about these experienced guys. You mentioned the American League in the East Coast. The two traditional leagues we recruit from, and the whole league does. One emerging trend, and Guildford recruited really well from here last year, is the what was the Canadian Intersports League, now I think it's called Youth Sports.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you look at those trends, what other teams are doing, and you go, okay, that's working, that's not working so much, on some failures as well. It works both ways. Talk to us about those developing markets and those different leagues.
I think teams in our league have always looked at those markets. The problem is the youth sports has become such a good league now, is so underestimated, that the top players from those leagues are signing American League deals. Yeah. And they're aspiring to play in higher leagues, and so it doesn't mean there's not good players looking to come over, but the guys coming straight out of university, they've got their eye on still making the NHL, so they're looking to play in the East Coast League, try to get a call up to the American League, and or sign those American League deals, and they're not in a hurry to jump overseas or jump over to the UK. So it's finding those guys that maybe are recognizing that they're not making the NHL, but are still very good hockey players and are looking for something different, that are looking to come over. And so it's a tough balance. It's not easy to find. And obviously Guildford had some success finding some guys that maybe were a year or two into their pro career that were from U Sports, and guys directly from U Sports. And it's a fantastic league, and I think we can't deny trends, right? What works for one team, other teams say, well, maybe I'll give that a try and look more into that area. But I think you'll find a lot more younger guys, and I think it goes along the lines. There are teams, I've talked to numerous coaches, myself included. We always want to get a little bit younger and hungrier and more energetic. So I think that's what is turned the attention to those leagues.
We're talking about development and change very much here. This is your third year as Blaze head coach that we're going into. How do you think you've changed as a coach? What about your philosophies, how you approach coaching and managing a team?
I think I've definitely learned a lot in the last couple of years. Obviously, I've been involved in coaching for quite some time now, but being the head honcho and being behind the bench, I think probably the biggest adjustment for me was I was such a passionate player, and I could go and express that on the ice, and maybe in year one, I still had that emotion, and I didn't know how to express it, and sometimes I was a little bit vocal on the ice and on the bench, and and expressing my emotions maybe in not the right way. And I think I was a lot better this year. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be, I'm a fiery guy, there's going to be times I'm going to get emotional on the bench, whether it's a bad call, whatever the case may be. But I think I've learned a lot in that area, managing players, accepting guys for who they are, strength, weaknesses, things like that. And in principles, I can't say it's changed a whole lot. I think how we look at what we need in regards to this organization, the type of player, the type of, I think, more mentality, where guys are at on their career. And I think I don't know if Coventry's a place that, we want to have guys that are just winding down their careers. And it's, I think I think going along the lines of going younger and hungrier, you get guys that are still motivated. They still want to go play for the jersey and play for one another. And I think that's, the meaning behind that. Now, that doesn't mean that there's guys that are in their early 30s, mid 30s that won't do that. But
Ryan Dingle, for instance.
Just exactly. I mean, great, fantastic example. And that guy is team first through and through. And but sometimes it's tough to find. And I think maybe people underestimate the challenges of recruiting in this league. And it's we're going on a lot of word of mouth, watching a lot of video, and we don't have huge scouting staffs that are keeping an eye on things for us all season long. So you try to gather as much information as possible and try to learn as much about a guy as you possibly can before you make a decision.
But you only really know what you're going to get when he walks through the door, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if a guy has been playing in the East Coast League, trying to get up to the American League his whole career, and you're probably going to get great references on him. And now he's come over, he's got a different type of motivation, and you just never know how they're going to react. So, and that's what I mean. You really got to gather information on guys, and you're not just signing a piece of paper or a resume. So getting to know guys and gathering as much information is important as well. But I've learned a lot. I mean, we could sit here for hours on end and talk about that. But year on year, I felt that I've learned a lot, and I've made my mistakes, and we're just looking to improve on that and get better.
2018, 2019 is just around the corner. So let's start with what we've got so far as a roster, and let's start with the Brits. That's kind of where you started with recruitment, bringing in Alex Forbes as an outskating forward, signed from Milton Keynes. Last season, there were 3 outskating Brits. We've retained them all. But when Luke Ferrara got injured 3/4 of the way through the season, our Brit pack looked spread thin. Was this something you've addressed by bringing in Forbesy?
Yeah, I think it's always a tough balance. In my first year here, we obviously made the decision with 4 full lines, and what we felt was that kind of spread it out our budget a little bit much, and we maybe lacked a little bit of quality. And we went the other way last year, and I do think it did benefit us. But whichever way you go, there's going to be a downside, and that that comes into budget restrictions, and you'll never hear me complain about our budget, but you have to be realistic in what you can do. And and I just felt that a guy like Alex Forbes, just adding a little bit of depth. He's a guy that's a hard-working guy. He's a good pro at a young age as well. He's got a great mentality, a great attitude, and I just thought he'd be such a good complement to our current group. Yeah. And locking up those guys for 2-year deals as well, like Ferrara, Clements, and V was important because these guys are starting to get a little bit older, a little bit more experience, and you know what? There's no denying that other teams in the league will keep their eye on them and be knocking on their door one day. So we wanted to get those guys in place for the next couple of years so we can build on that. And then adding Alex to that was a huge compliment to them.
With the imports, you've started at the back. Netminder Kevin Nastiuk, he won us games at times last season. He was one of the top netminders in the league. I guess that was a no-brainer when he expressed his interest to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. He was one of our primary targets for this season, and we were thrilled to get him back. And you know, it goes without saying he was, you know, my player of the year. He was the player's player of the year. I mean, he was good for us from start to finish, and you know, he gave us a chance to win every game. And I know that's a cliche, but he certainly did. And, you know, there wasn't many off nights for him last season, and you know, that's something that's very important at this level. And you know, if you got a goalie back there that everyone has faith in, everyone plays a little bit looser, a little bit more comfortable, and you know, less you're worrying about what's behind you, the more you can look forward.
Kevin Noble returns as well. Depending on what happens with Jordan Petrus, at this point, the only letter-wearing returnee from last season. He does a lot of the unnoticed things and a lot of the very noticed things as well for this club.
Kevin's a fantastic player for us, and you know what, just come out and say it. I know he's had his critics as well, but you said it best. He does a lot of things that go unnoticed, and I would say maybe at times last year he was overworked, and that's on me. You know, we didn't, and that goes along the lines of not finding those two top D men, and I think through that Kevin was a lot more was put on his shoulders, and he played a lot of crucial minutes, a lot of PK time, a lot of matching against other teams' top lines, and there was some good hockey players in this league last year. So you know, he had a tough night in, night out, and he competes, he battles on the PK. You know, he's as good as anybody. You know, he'll eat pucks for fun, and you know, he talks out there. I think one of his biggest traits that's so underestimated is his communication skills. And on the ice, certainly in your defensive zone, you need talkers. You need guys that are helping each other out, and he's as good at that as anybody. And you know, the plan this year was to get him back on board, but also surround him with a better defensive core so that he can be more effective when he does best.
Before we go on to talking about one of the new defensive core in Trey Lewis, Ben Lake and Danik Paquette are the other two returning forwards who, for my mind, really developed as the season went on. They got used to the Elite League, what life was like here, and I think we only saw the best of them towards the end. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very fair. You know, Ben's a guy that, you know, we brought in and was played, you know, the first half. He was kind of, you know, up and down our lineup, you know, center, wing, and sometimes it's tough to get settled in, but at the same time, that's crucial for a team to have that luxury. And you know, once he settled in on that line with Dingle and Danik, I think we've seen what he was capable of doing. I mean, he skates as well as anybody in the league. He can really shoot the puck, and you know, he brings that energy and tenacity that we look for here in Coventry. And you know, Danik, you know, it was a bit of a tough going for him in the first half. You know, and through suspensions and you know, a couple injuries that kind of held him back a little bit as well, and he was in and out of the lineup. It's really tough to find any bit of momentum for him, but again, when he settled in on that line, we've seen his quality, and you know, he brings obviously certain elements to the table that other guys don't bring, but you know, I think his vision, his playmaking ability is as good as anybody, and you know, obviously the intention next year to keep him on the ice a lot more often.
Absolutely, and I think for him, he knows. I mean, player of that role gets to know what referees' traits are. They're always going to be a player that a referee keeps an eye on throughout an evening's hockey. So now he kind of, I guess, knows what the expectations are, knows what he can and cannot get away with. It'll make things a little bit easier for him going into.
Yeah, and I mean, and he's a player that plays on edge, and we know that. And you know, is he going to do something that maybe crosses the line? We're going to certainly try to avoid it. But you know, when you sign a player like Danik, you got to expect that, you know, what maybe forces him in the stands every once in a while is what also makes him a dynamic player. And you know, it's just finding that balance. And you know, we formed a good relationship last year, and you know, Danik's working hard this summer to be ready for next season. And like you said, he knows what to expect from the league through reffing, the style of play. You know, I don't think Danik needs to prove himself to anybody anymore when it comes in regard to toughness. So you know, our focus is to get him playing. That's what we want. We want him playing, making plays, and you know, everything else is a bonus.
Our first new import, new to the league, our first year pro, Trey Lewis, a Memorial Cup champion as a captain with the Halifax Mooseheads. He looks like he's going to bring some of that toughness. He's going to bring a lot of the leadership that we've lost with the likes of Dingle and Robinson moving on. A very, very crucial signing, I think, for the club. Yeah,
I think so too. He's you know, I spoke to his coach in Halifax. I spoke to his coach at St. FX UNB. You know, we did a lot of work on him, and the one common theme I got was nobody will work harder than this guy. and his grit is second to none. He wins puck battles. He looks for big hits. He plays physical, and again, the fighting element I think in today's game is a bonus. It's not something that we look to just sign a guy specifically for that. And he's a guy that moves quite well, but his compete levels are second to none. Great character, great teammate, and leadership skills are so important in this day and age. And I think he'll be a big player for us. And although he'll be a first-year pro, I think he's a guy that will maybe not be a first-year pro, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of youth sports, I guess, because you have those extra years playing amongst your peers as well, but you do get a taste of the pro level there. And of course, Danny, as we're kind of coming to the end of our time together for this afternoon, we have a lot more signings to make. Where are we in the next couple of weeks? Have we got a few? Have we got a few things?
We should, hopeful... Craig's twiddling his thumbs over there, but he's been twiddling them for weeks. So I'm hoping to get him some information here in the next day or so. So there's a good possibility there'll be an announcement this week, and possibly even two.
Brilliant. Thank you once again, Danny, for your time. Appreciated this. Blaze fans, everybody else, very much enjoyed talking to Danny. Thank you for tweeting all your tweets in for questions to him. Incorporated them into the thing as we went. If it's appropriate, nearer the start of the season, once we've got a full picture of the team, we might do this again. We'll let you know if we want you to tweet and ask some questions then. Till then, enjoy the rest of your summer.